New Orleans, 1918. The city is alive, pulsing with the raw energy of jazz, a sound born from struggle, resilience, and the collision of cultures. The French Quarter hums with life. Street vendors hawk their wares, horse-drawn carriages clatter over cobblestones, and music spills from every open window. But beneath this vibrant surface, something dark is stirring. A shadow moves through the humid night, silent, unseen, carrying an axe and a hunger for blood. They called him the Axeman of New Orleans, a killer who didn't just take lives, but toyed with an entire city's soul. His crimes were brutal, his motives unclear, and his legacy eternal. In this episode, we're diving into one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. This is the story of the Axeman, and the night New Orleans danced to save itself from a demon. But before we dive in, this video contains graphic details of violence and murder. It is intended for mature audiences, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. As always, remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to stay up to date with the channel. All right, let's dive into the video. To understand the Axeman, we need to understand the city he haunted. New Orleans in 1918 was a place unlike any other, a crucible of cultures where French, Spanish, Creole, African, and Italian influences collided. The city was a port, a gateway to the world where ships brought goods, people, and ideas. Jazz, that defiant, soulful music, was born here, in the smoky bars of Storyville, the city's red light district. It was a sound that captured the joy and pain of a city grappling with its identity. But New Orleans was also a city of shadows. Poverty was rampant, especially in the immigrant neighborhoods. The Italian community, in particular, faced suspicion and hostility. In 1891, the city had been rocked by the lynching of 11 Italian immigrants, accused of murdering Police Chief David Hennessy in a case tied to the mafia. The wounds of that event still lingered, fueling distrust between Italians and the city's establishment. Add to that the Spanish flu, which was sweeping the globe, claiming millions of lives. By 1918, New Orleans was a city on edge. Death was a familiar visitor, and fear was a constant companion. Into this volatile mix stepped a killer. On May 23, 1918, the Axeman of New Orleans began his reign of terror. His first victims were Joseph and Catherine Maggio, an Italian couple who ran a small grocery store out of their home at the corner of Magnolia and Upper Line Streets. They were ordinary people, hard-working immigrants trying to carve out a life in a city that wasn't always welcoming. They had no reason to suspect that their lives would end in a nightmare. In the early hours of May 23rd, the Axeman crept into the Maggio home. He didn't smash a window or break a lock. Instead, he used a chisel to carefully remove a single panel from the back door, a method so precise, so deliberate it would become his signature. Inside, Joseph and Catherine were asleep, unaware of the figure moving silently through their home. The killer found their bedroom, where the couple lay in a simple bed. He carried two weapons, a straight razor and an axe, likely taken from Maggio's own tool shed. What happened next was a scene of unimaginable horror. The Axeman stood over Joseph Maggio and brought the razor down across his throat. The blade bit deep, severing arteries and nearly decapitating him. Blood sprayed across the bed, soaking the sheets and splattering the walls. Catherine woke to her husband's gurgling screams, but before she could react, the killer turned on her. The axe came down, smashing into her skull with a sickening crunch. Blood and bone fragments mixed with the crimson pool spreading across the floor. The killer didn't stop there. He struck again and again, as if driven by a fury that went beyond mere murder. When it was over, the couple lay dead, their bodies mutilated, the room a grotesque tableau of blood and violence. When police arrived, they were stunned by the brutality. Joseph's head was barely attached to his body, and Catherine's skull was shattered, her face unrecognizable. Blood had seeped into the floorboards, and the walls were streaked with crimson arcs. The axe, still wet with blood, was left carelessly on the floor, as if the killer wanted it to be found. But what puzzled investigators most was what they didn't find. Nothing was stolen. Not the money in Joseph's wallet. Not the jewelry on the dresser. This wasn't a robbery. It was something else. Something personal. Something evil. Near the home, police found a cryptic message scrawled in chalk on the sidewalk. "Mrs. Joseph Maggio will sit up tonight. Just write Mrs. Tony." The words were baffling. Was it a clue? A taunt? A reference to another victim? No one knew. But it sent a chill through the investigators. The message was the first hint that the Axeman wasn't just a killer. He was playing a game with the city, one that would only grow more twisted. The Maggio murders were just the beginning. Over the next 17 months, the Axeman struck again and again, each attack more brazen, each scene more horrific. His victims were often Italian grocers, though the pattern wasn't absolute. His methods were consistent. Chisel a door panel, use the victim's own axe, leave no valuables taken. The city of New Orleans was gripped by a fear unlike anything it had known before. Let's walk through the timeline of his terror, piecing together the nightmare that held a city hostage. June 27, 1918, just over a month after the Maggio murders, Louis B. Sumer, a Polish immigrant, and his mistress Harriet Lowe were asleep in the back of B. Sumer's grocery store at Dorgenois and La Harpe Streets. The Axeman struck again, chiseling a panel from the back door to slip inside. He found the couple sleeping and raised his axe. The first blow struck Basumer above the temple, splitting his skull and sending blood cascading down his face. Harriet woke to the sound of the attack, only to feel the axe crash into her head, just above her ear. Blood poured from their wounds, soaking the bed and pooling on the floor. Miraculously, both of them survived, though their injuries were catastrophic. Basumer's skull was fractured, and Harriet's face was partially paralyzed from the blow. When neighbors found them, the couple was barely conscious, surrounded by blood-soaked sheets. Harriet later told police she saw a dark figure looming over her, a heavy-set man in a dark suit and slouch hat. But her description was vague, and her memory was clouded by trauma. The police found the same chilling details as before: a chiseled door panel, a bloodied axe left behind, and no sign of robbery. The Axeman wasn't interested in money. He was interested in fear. The attack on Basumer and Lowe sent shockwaves through the city. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was the killer targeting Italians specifically? Was he a vengeful spirit, as some whispered in the voodoo-soaked streets of New Orleans? The police had no answers, only bodies and questions. And the Axeman wasn't done. August 5, 1918. Anna Schneider, a 28-year-old pregnant woman, was alone in her home on Elmira Street. She was 8 months pregnant, her husband away for the night. In the early hours, she woke to a nightmare, a figure standing over her bed, axe in hand. Before she could scream, the blade came down, smashing into her face. Her scalp was torn open, and blood gushed onto the pillow, staining the bed. Her teeth were shattered and her jaw was broken. Somehow Anna survived, clinging to life as neighbors rushed her to Charity Hospital. She gave birth to a healthy baby days later, a miracle amidst the horror. But like the others, she could offer no clear description of her attacker, only a vague memory of a dark, hulking figure. Schneider's attack was different. She wasn't Italian, nor was she a grocer. The Axeman's pattern, if there ever was one, was breaking. The city's fear grew, as no one could predict who might be next. The newspapers fueled the panic, with headlines screaming "Axeman strikes again" and "New Orleans under siege." Vigilante groups formed, patrolling the streets with shotguns and lanterns. Families slept with weapons by their beds, and some even boarded up their doors, though it did little good against a killer who could chisel his way in. 5 days later, on August 10th, the Axeman targeted Joseph Romano, an elderly Italian grocer living with his two nieces, Pauline and Mary Bruno, on Gravier Street. The sisters were woken by a commotion in the early hours. They rushed to their uncle's room and saw a large man in a dark suit fleeing through the back door. Romano was on the floor, his head split open by an axe. Blood and brain matter coated the bed, the walls streaked with crimson. The sisters' screams echoed through the neighborhood as Romano bled out, dying before help could arrive. Their description of the killer matched earlier reports, a heavy-set man in dark clothing and a slouch hat, but it offered no new leads. The Romano murder pushed the city to a breaking point. Italian families in particular lived in terror, wondering if they were being targeted for their heritage. The police were under immense pressure, but their investigation was a mess. Fingerprints were rarely collected, and forensic science was in its infancy. The Axeman seemed to know this, taunting the city with his boldness. He left no clear evidence, only blood and fear. The attacks paused for a time, giving the city a false sense of relief. But on March 10th, 1919, across the river in Gretna, the Axeman struck again. Charles Cortimiglia, his wife Rosie, and their 2-year-old daughter Mary were asleep in their home. The killer chiseled his way in as always and found the family sleeping. Charles woke to the sound of the door panel being removed and confronted the intruder. A struggle ensued, but the Axeman was stronger. He swung the axe, fracturing Charles's skull with a single blow. Blood poured from the wound as he collapsed. Rosie, clutching her daughter, begged for their lives, but the killer showed no mercy. The axe came down on Rosie's head, splitting her scalp and sending her to the floor. Then, in an act of unthinkable cruelty, the killer turned on little Mary, still in her mother's arms. The axe struck the child's head, killing her instantly. Blood soaked the room, pooling around the bodies. Charles and Rosie survived, though their injuries were severe. Rosie's memory of the attack was fragmented, but she later claimed the killer was a large man with dark hair. Her description, like the others, was too vague to be useful. The loss of their daughter shattered the couple, and their marriage never recovered. The Cortimiglia attack was the Axeman's most horrific yet, not just for its brutality, but for the targeting of a child. New Orleans was no longer just afraid, it was broken. The final confirmed attack came on October 27, 1919. Mike Pepitone, another Italian grocer, was asleep in his home on Scott Street. His wife, Mary, was woken by a noise and rushed to the bedroom. She arrived just in time to see a large figure fleeing through the back door. Mike lay on the bed, his head shattered by an axe. Blood and brain matter had splattered across the walls, dripping onto the floor. The axe, as always, was left behind, its blade still wet with blood. Mary's screams alerted neighbors, but the killer was gone, vanishing into the night. By the end of 1919, the Axeman was credited with at least 6 murders and up to a dozen attacks. His victims included men, women, and even a child. His method was consistent, his motives a mystery. The city was paralyzed, its people living in a constant state of dread. But the Axeman wasn't done with New Orleans. Not yet. He had one final act to play, one that would cement his place in history. Before we continue on, if you are enjoying the video so far, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you don't like it, let me know down in the comments. Your support truly means everything. All right, back to the video. On March 13, 1919, just 3 days after the Cortimiglia attack, a letter arrived at the Times-Picayune newspaper. It was addressed to esteemed mortal and signed simply, The Axeman. The words were unlike anything the city had seen. Part threat, part performance, written with a theatrical flair that seemed to mock the city's fear. It was as if the killer was stepping out of the shadows, not to reveal himself, but to tighten his grip on New Orleans' soul.
Esteemed mortal, they have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit, and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, besmeared with blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. If you wish, you may tell the police to be careful not to rile me. Of course, I am a reasonable spirit. I take no offense at the way they have conducted their investigations in the past. In fact, they have been so utterly stupid as to not only amuse me, but His Satanic Majesty, Francis Joseph, etc., but tell them to beware. Let them not try to discover what I am, for it were better that they were never born than to incur the wrath of the Axeman. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe.
The letter was a bombshell. Published in every major newspaper, it sent New Orleans into a frenzy. Was it real? Was the Axeman truly a demon, as he claimed? Or was this a cruel hoax designed to torment the city further? The police had no answers, but the public took the threat seriously. On the night of March 19, 1919, designated as the Axeman's deadline, New Orleans transformed into a city of sound. Jazz bands played in every dance hall, spilling into the streets. Families who couldn't afford live music cranked their phonographs to full volume, filling their homes with the defiant rhythms of ragtime and early jazz. Neighbors gathered in cramped living rooms playing makeshift instruments, spoons, washboards, anything to make noise. The air was thick with music, a desperate symphony to ward off a killer who claimed to be more than human. And it worked. On the night of March 19th, no one was attacked. The Axeman, true to his word, or perhaps amused by the city's compliance, spared New Orleans. But the question lingers: why the jazz? Some historians, like Bond Ruggles, author of The Axeman's Shadow, argue the letter was a publicity stunt. In 1917, Storyville, New Orleans' red light district and the birthplace of jazz, had been shut down by federal order, devastating the city's music scene. Could the letter have been written by a musician or promoter, hoping to revive jazz by turning it into a weapon against fear? The theory is compelling, but it doesn't explain the murders themselves. Others believe the Axeman wrote the letter, reveling in the power to make an entire city dance to his tune. The letter wasn't just a threat, it was a performance. The Axeman didn't just want to kill, he wanted to control. For one night, he held New Orleans in the palm of his hand, forcing its people to play his game. And in doing so, he became something more than a killer. He became a legend. The Axeman was never caught, and his identity remains one of the great mysteries of American crime history. Over the decades, countless theories have emerged, each trying to unmask the killer who haunted New Orleans. Was he a man driven by rage, a demon as he claimed, or something else entirely? Let's explore the leading theories, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that may never be solved. Theory 1. The Mafia. Many of the Axeman's victims were Italian grocers, leading some to speculate that the killings were tied to organized crime. New Orleans had a significant Italian population, and the 1891 lynching of 11 Italians after the murder of Police Chief David Hennessy had left deep scars. The Hennessy case was blamed on the mafia, though the evidence was shaky. Could the Axeman have been a hitman targeting Italian businesses, perhaps as part of a protection racket or a vendetta? The theory gained traction because of the ethnic pattern, but it falls apart under scrutiny. The Axeman took no money or valuables, and his attacks were chaotic, lacking the precision of a professional hit. If this was the mafia, it was unlike any operation they'd run before. Theory 2. Joseph Monfray. In his 1970 book, The Axeman of New Orleans, crime writer Colin Wilson popularized the idea that Monfray, a man with a criminal record, was the killer. According to Wilson, Monfray was shot dead in Los Angeles in 1921 by Esther Albano, the widow of Mike Pepitone, the Axeman's final victim. Albano allegedly claimed Monfray confessed to her husband's murder. The story is dramatic, but historian Michael Newton, in his 2017 book, The Axeman's Blade, debunked it. Newton found no record of Monfray in Los Angeles or of Albano's arrest. The Monfray theory persists in popular culture, but it's built on shaky ground, a compelling story with little evidence to back it up. Theory 3. A female killer. Historian Bond Ruggles offers a provocative idea in her 2019 book, The Axeman's Shadow. The Axeman might have been a woman. She points to the small entry points chiseled in doors, suggesting a smaller stature, and the fact that many victims survived, which could indicate less physical strength. Ruggles also notes that the Axeman's attacks often targeted couples, with women frequently bearing the brunt of the violence, which could point to a gendered motive, perhaps jealousy or revenge. The idea challenges the traditional image of a hulking male killer, and while it's speculative, it forces us to rethink our assumptions about who the Axeman could have been. Theory 4. The supernatural. The Axeman's letter claimed he was a demon from the hottest hell, and in a city steeped in voodoo and superstition, some believed him. New Orleans has always been a place where the line between the living and the dead feels thin. Survivors described the killer as a shadowy, almost ghostly figure, moving with unnatural silence. Some whispered that he was a vengeful spirit, summoned by a curse or ritual gone wrong. Of course, this theory is more folklore than fact, but it speaks to the primal fear the Axeman inspired, a fear that went beyond human understanding. Theory 5. A publicity stunt. Some historians, including Ruggles, suggest the letter was a hoax, possibly written by a jazz musician or promoter. Storyville's closure in 1917 had gutted New Orleans' music scene, and jazz was struggling to survive. The letter's demand for jazz could have been a calculated move to revive the music's popularity, turning fear into a marketing opportunity. This doesn't explain the murders, but it could account for the night of March 19th, when the city played jazz to appease a killer. The theory is cynical, but plausible, especially in a city where art and survival have always been intertwined. There's one final theory, less discussed but worth considering. Multiple killers. The Axeman's attacks spanned nearly 2 years, with varying methods and victims. Could there have been copycats, inspired by the initial murders? The lack of forensic evidence makes it impossible to know, but the idea that one person could evade capture so completely, for so long, raises questions. Perhaps the Axeman wasn't a single person, but a shadow cast by many, a collective nightmare given form. Each theory offers a piece of the puzzle, but none complete the picture. The Axeman slipped through the cracks of history, leaving only blood, fear, and a letter that haunts us to this day. Whoever he was, or whatever he was, he left an indelible mark on New Orleans. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, then check out these videos on the screen now. If you have a topic suggestion, please send it to the email in the description. And as always, remember to like, share the video, and subscribe to our channel. And remember, the only thing scarier than these stories is missing out on our next video.